Carl Michael von Hausswolff is an internationally renowned and respected Swedish artist. Although firmly rooted in the fertile soil of innovative ideas, these ideas have manifested themselves in performances, experimental music, photography, installations, writings, galleries, art collectives, record labels, films, curating, and even grandiose projects like creating brand new countries. With an open and very creative mind, a tongue-in-cheek sense of humor, and an increasing environmental awareness, von Hausswolff's treatments of ideas and raw material turn into clusters of frequencies designed to make you think. Never with demagogic intent, but always with a wish for personal, critical thinking. And often in a display of what usually lies hidden in invisible and inaudible spheres and layers of perception. He makes us see and hear things that we're usually unaware of, makes us aware of the necessity to always explore. For Carl Michael von Hausswolff, the role and identity of the artist contains considerably more than just making expected, commodified artworks.
Within myself, I don't really want to be an artist. I don't want to have that kind of profession label. So I constantly doubt that I am an artist, and maybe what I'm doing is not really art. Maybe it's just something else. Maybe it's just some kind of, activity that in the future will not even be considered art. So I think that problem is for me very developing. I mean, it develops me in terms of and it also develops my awareness of not only who I am and my identity, but more what I'm doing and what kind of artworks that I create and do, and I reflect better, and I can criticize these artworks better myself, and I have some kind of a distance to them.
No, I never considered going into an art school in that sense. The only thing I wanted to catch up with was the history of music and the history of literature. So I went a couple of years at the university studying literature and musicology, but not for very, very long. I mean, I think it was quite common. I don't really know how people in general started to become artists or composers or musicians, but I realized, and many people working with music, that if you went to the music conservatory or academy or something, we believed that we wouldn't be taught what we wanted to do. So that kind of music that we wanted to do stemmed more from the rock and roll world, and that was not really taught in the music conservatories. In terms of visual art, I actually never really considered going into an art school. And when I started to do things, I actually didn't really know that there was something called performance art. I learned that afterwards. Somebody told me that, well, there is something called performance art. Maybe you should look into that. So, but it's interesting with art schools and me, because I always thought that someone that had been studying art in an art academy knew something that I didn't know. That they had some secrets that I would never know unless I started to study in a school. And this idea has been with me for quite a long time, actually. So every time I kind of met a visual artist that came out from some kind of academy or something, they were kind of special for me, because I was kind of looking at them. Are they doing something that I can't do? Do they know something I don't know? It was quite amazing. But at that time, I don't think I thought that I had time to go into an art school. I had other things to do, like making records or starting a record company and doing all these other things.
I think maybe it has changed a little bit now, because it's very much taught out in academies and so on, that you have to sort of have to develop an artistic identity. You have to behave in this and that way and not be too foggy about what you're doing. And I don't really agree with that. I think you should be as open to as many disciplines as possible, and use any kind of material, sound or vision or video, photography, or anything. And in that sense, but I can be like that too occasionally, because I can just, when I come somewhere in the world and I know that, for instance, the people I'm talking with don't know anything about like art installations or like this kind of conceptual art and so on, and they ask me what I do, and I could say, well, I do electronic music, because it's a way for me to be able to talk to people. If I say contemporary music, they're not really sure what I'm talking about. At the same time, I can say I'm a photographer. But at the same time, I know that I'm not a photographer, because I don't know the things that real, so to speak, photographers know, their techniques, knowledge of various types of films, and etc., etc. So I can be quite. I can also say that all art is political, if I mean that kind of discourse and this kind of discussion about with somebody that is totally apolitical. But then on the other hand, I can also say that all art is just, I can also say that it's bullshit, and it doesn't serve a purpose at all. It's just something that, comes along with society, because society has some kind of need for it, just for leisure. But on the other hand, I can also say that art is it's a fundament for the development of the human civilization, including everything that we do. I don't have a solid definition or a conclusion of my whole work is about this thing. I can very much say that my work is not projected on myself. It's not about me. It's about something else, and I am quite interested in phenomena that are in my surroundings. Everything from very solid kind of architecture and social structures to phenomena that I cannot really see or hear or grasp sort of unknown possibilities of what might be occurring around me, and just try to sort of play with those kind of phenomena and energies. So one big kind of conclusion or a block that everything might rotate around is the phenomena of energy, and what energy is, and not only the energy of like that creates electricity and muscle energy or whatever, but also mental energy and energies that could be translated into telepathy or spiritualism or these kind of things. I have a conservative point of view when it comes to my own person, that the me, because I can look at a whole series of photographs of me from when I was a baby until now, and I can look upon these photographs, and they change. My face change, my everything changes. The texture of my skin, everything. But at the same time, when I look upon them, and when I think about myself and how I was when I was a kid, I'm exactly the same person. There's no difference at all. Nothing has changed. But it hasn't been static. It's just there as I'm just there as an organism that is always there. So it's a give and take between that timelessness and agelessness in my individual, in my deep person, contra the development of my body and what I look like and how my experiences and so on. And I can see this in the art I do too. That at some point it's basically the same, but it develops into new things. And to answer your question about if I look for new things, yes, I always look for new things. I love new things. I don't want to repeat myself. And if I find myself that I've been repeating myself in a way that I don't get a new experience from it, I abandon that, because I don't want to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. I think it's useless and pointless, and I think it's very depressing. But a newness, it comes with technology, it comes with but more like new ways of composing things, of structuring things, of finding things, finding new sounds. I mean, why I work with electronic voice phenomena and these kind of things is because I think it's an interesting instrument for me artistically. And luckily I also then work with Michael Esposito, who is like more of an EVP researcher, but he's the real McCoy, and I'm just an artist. I just want to use this as an instrument, and here is a collaboration that is quite fruitful and really nice. So I'm always looking for new things, but I'm at the same time totally aware of that nothing is new. There are so many artists and composers who express it in the way that they do it because they sort of have to do it, or because they feel a need to do it. It's like they feel an urge to do it. They must do it, or they die, or something. I mean, and I was thinking about myself, and I'm not sure that it is like that with me. I mean, I do it because I happen to start with something at some point, and then I think I am consequent in my behavior, that if I start something, I kind of wanted to see it through. So if I start an artwork, if I start a project, I really would like to see it finished, done, and then you go on with the next artwork. But also with everything you do, it's like if I started somewhere in the late 70s or something with or even earlier, maybe when I started to listen to music. It was not only like a consumerist, project. It was like for me it was very creative to listen to music, because something happened, and then I just see it as a necessary good or evil that I continue to do things. And one way why I could see it in that way is that I very rarely do something unless somebody asks me to do something. If somebody gives me a deadline, I do it, and I keep the deadline, and I deliver.
In the early 1980s, Carl Michael von Hausswolff was instrumental in founding art collective and record label Radium 22605. It didn't take long before the small independent label became a center of interesting Swedish music, both avant-garde experimental and innovating dark pop and rock and roll, with bands like Blue for Two and Union Carbide Productions. But Radium was always more than just a record company. There were art exhibitions, literary events, film screenings, publishing, music festivals, and many other things going on under Radium's radical umbrella. They brought a nice slice of avant-garde art to Sweden, and at the same time exported the very finest of what Sweden could offer to their international network of like-minded art rebels.
It was intended to be like an organic thing that could grow if it wanted to. I had the experience of running a little independent gallery before, and also being involved with a little bit like another experiment, record company in Göteborg called Sista Bussen, which I did an LP for them, and they also made one Leather Nun 7-inch or whatever they did. So I had this kind of, and then me and Ulrich Hillebrand, who was a photographer and also a friend of Udo Breger and William Burroughs and Brian Geisen and so on. We met and we started Radium, and it was intended first of all to be a magazine, but we wanted it to be an artwork in itself. So everything that was contained within the name Radium 22605 was an artwork, because we were very much into the ideas of Joseph Beuys and these kind of things, that everyone is an artwork and everything is art, and everything you do, your life is art, and everything is art. So a record company, or it was not really a record company, this thing called Radium 22605 should be an artwork, but it could be production units, it could we could do exhibitions and so on. We started to do to invite people for this magazine, but then we started to do exhibitions in our little small space, and then we made one record, and then we made a few more and so on, and it happened like that. So it became very organic. We were really open, but at the same time we were very we were not open like the gallery that I had before called Gallery DS. That had been really open, because anybody could just come in there and do an exhibition. And it was quite fun for a while. But there were a few artists that I could not really stand, It's they were horrible, actually. But it was okay from that point of view, because it was supposed to be open. Radium was not open in that sense. It was open aesthetically, but we were very, dictatorial. In terms of we did not let anybody in, because we wanted to have the ability to choose. And then within that choice, It could be failures or whatever, you had, or success or whatever. I think the area that we were living in contained a lot of artists and musicians and junkies and prostitutes or whatever. These kind of people that actually live on the margins and are very slow, low or no rents, no high costs of living, and just and you meet people and you kind of it sort of creates itself from that kind of community. It has a little bit of life of its own, whether you kind of want it or not, because every time, not only with Radium, also with Dia's art ensemble, and with the different things that we were doing there, it's something that feels like it creates itself, because it was not all the time that I wanted to be in these groups and this community. Sometimes I got totally frustrated and pissed off and said, I'm leaving this bullshit, and so it's something that this kind of community kind of created itself. But from a personal point of view, I mean, I'm quite a social person. I like to do things by myself, but I need to talk to somebody. I need to meet people, be with people, do things with people. I need to have a certain kind of dialogue, maybe not from a language point of view, but just to do things, to make things happen, and so on. So it's a need from my own point of view and then this balance between working with other people, working for other people, because if you have a record company and so on, you actually work for other musicians to create platforms for them to kind of work on, and those kind of balances has to be leveled as well. And sometimes the balances were totally out of balance, and you get really frustrated on your own personal art or work, music or work, whatever you do, and you have to balance up these kind of things. And it's a give and take situation, but it's kind of formed by the neighborhood that you're in.
Already when emerging as a young artist in Gothenburg in the late 1970s, Carl Michael von Hausswolff wouldn't confine himself to one single artistic discipline or expression. Music, photography, writing, performance art, and larger conceptual works that often include other artists as well are all flowers in a bouquet that is part personal expression and part exploration of creativity itself. One important ingredient has always been travel. In the 1980s, von Hausswolff and fellow Radium artist Erik Pauser, working together under the name Faus, traveled around the world and documented their locations wherever they might be. The results, Faus Audiodrome and Faus Videodrome, are examples of this daredevil attitude of just throwing oneself out into adventure and pilgrimage. In a similar way, a journey in 1986 to the legendary assassin Hassan Isaba's Eagle Nest, Alamut, in Iran, became a similar artwork, which is the experience itself, while the documentation merely retells the story.
I think it could have been somewhere around, the beginning of the 80s or something, somewhere around there. And it had to do with first realizing that
I was the center of the universe. And of course, in this way, you have to kind of accept various ideas from other people to read and study. I mean, people like Crowley, people like also Bennett, and these kind of, but also pop stars and these kind of things that interested me, like Robert Fripp or Brian Eno, these kind of people. And so to look upon them, they are their own kind of epicenter. And then realizing that you are actually the center of, and you have the Crowley thing that each woman and man is a star, right? And for me, that means that each one of us has is the center of the universe by ourselves, and then we have all this thing orbiting around you. And this was for me very important to realize this, but at the same time keeping a very antagonistic approach to egocentricity, because I cannot stand egomaniacs. When you act as an artist, or when you are an artist, I mean, when you do things, you don't really think about these kind of things, like why it's important and so on, because it's so embedded in your own life structure that it becomes attached to your life. And I think for me the most important thing is the curiosity that all the time escalates, curiosity of phenomena in the world. I mean, and how the world is structured, what it is, and of course with the major questions, what life is, and why we live, and all this kind of. That's the whole scenario of living and life, and the various little details that life contains, and the curiosity it sort of breeds, and I think this is the most. I think if I wasn't like curious about things, then I wouldn't do anything. It would be boring. If something is good, it doesn't really necessarily have to be defined as a good artwork. It can be a bad artwork, but if it's new, it interests me, and it becomes sort of something that I would like to work with, and I look for new things. A good example is that when I was younger, I played guitar and piano, but I never learned it. I just taught myself some simple chords to play some rock and roll or something like that. And the reason was basically that other people were playing the instruments better. I mean, why don't I come up with something else that interests? So I started to develop some techniques that were new for me. And I was also quite irritated on critique. So I wanted to create something that didn't have any reference points. So nobody could really criticize it, because there were no reference to it. Of course there were, but I didn't know that there were references. So I always wanted to do something new, come up with something new, and many artists, they kind of look into something and they focus on something and they repeat it, and some repeat it just for the money, but some repeat it because of the study of it, of the intensity of doing the same thing day after day after day. I'm not really like that. I don't want to do something. I don't want to do the same thing again and again and again. That's why I don't really like touring, for instance.
Whether in collaborations with other artists like Hans Joachim Rodelius, Jim O'Rourke, or Jonsi from the Icelandic band Sigur Rós. In paying homage to his own sources of inspiration, like Brian Gysin or Friedrich Jürgensson, who claimed he could record the voices of the dead through electronic voice phenomena. Or in personal, private and meditative musical works, there's always an almost alchemical refinement present in von Hausswolff's work and process. A sensitivity in exploring sounds and psychic connections, a magical element of elevation that gains momentum on its own when it's left the intellectual conception and is headed for a direct contact with the listener, viewer, or partaker. His process can take shape or form in frequencies of sound, or in spaces flooded with strong red light, or in creating an interactive mixing desk with sounds from the oceans, with which people all over the world can make their own music. Permeating everything is von Hausswolff's open-minded and firm spirit of independence, and his determined vision that you can make art out of virtually anything.
I mean, my parents they are quite talented. They were quite talented in music and drawing and so on, but they never really explored that themselves. I've never really been encouraged to do anything of that sort. So I never really grew up in a kind of intellectual home or in that kind of situation. But the only thing I could say positively about my upbringing is that well, my father died when I was 13, so he and then my mother, she was more like, she didn't really care, which can be a very negative thing, but it's also for me quite positive, because that just meant that I could develop anything I wanted, because she didn't really care what I was doing. And of course, some time ago I could say to myself, why? She didn't care, she didn't love me or whatever. Maybe she didn't, or maybe she did as a, you know, like emotionally. But positively, I could basically do whatever I want. She didn't force me to become an architect or become a businessman or become anything. She didn't tell me what to do. I could just, you know, go on with what I'm doing within, you know, financial limits. And I didn't really know how other kids and teenagers and whatever, how their parents treated or looked upon them. I guess with my friends, it was a little bit of a general kind of idea that, you know, let the kids do what they want, basically. I think it's very positive, for me to just develop what I wanted to do, and, you know, but that also meant that if I needed some money, I better get a job, you know, and if I needed something else, some support, you know, some kind of psychological support or mental support, you know, get it from somewhere else, not from us, not from the parents. You have to sort of do this yourself, more or less, and then yeah. Intuition is the main motor. Sometimes it's a combination of some intellectual property that I have gained from maybe reading something or doing something, and then trying to sort of transform it into something that I want to do. And then this inspiration or this material follows after in maybe a text or something like this. It could be a technique, it could be something that somebody developed, 800 years ago, and then but intuition is the main machine when it comes to my work. I'm extremely non-creative on airplanes. Mm-hmm. I can't even read a book hardly. I can hardly read a book on an airplane. I can watch some of those movies that they have and like sit there. But I see what you mean. I'm very creative when it comes to the kind of state in between being awake and being asleep. So that's another that's another travel. When you travel to another state of mind, then I'm very creative. I'm very fast and very it just flows very quickly, the energy and so on. And I think those it's sort of the kind of opposite of static, being somewhere and then just go into another point. I can also be very creative when I move, when I walk, and sometimes some years ago when I did a workshop in the academy for students, I took them to the swimming pool, and I said, I want you to think about these kind of things, and you have to do a work for me till Friday. And when you swim, and you have to swim 1,000 meters, and you can count the first 500 meters, but then you just swim the same amount, and you think about this project, and let's see what happens. And very many of these students had very positive reactions to that kind of activity and this kind of movement, or that you move, that you're in motion, and then things happens with your mind. But of course, when you write something or sit by the desk and you do something and you write something, that's also another type of movement. So the influx of ideas is one thing, but then the practical writing something or constructing something, that's also a movement in itself. Then you can be very firm, sit still, and do what you have to do, because you move in your mind and you move in your action.
I have never claimed, and I will never claim that I have actually produced something or created something unique. So I'm very much like a product of former artists, of senior artists that I have met or that I've never met, and they're gone since a long time. So for me, I'm a little bit of a conservative person when it comes to tradition. I like tradition. I like history, and I also like when history is able to change. The history books get rewritten over and over again. I really like that. I'm inside a tradition, but it's a tradition that is not static. It's a living tradition, which means that it moves and it changes itself. It kind of develops, and so on.
If you don't have any money, and you really try to get some money, it's really difficult. But if you let go, and you let your mind go somewhere else, something always happens. and that opens up another channel for maybe just somebody comes into the room and says, hey, it's like, you know, I have this money for you, there you go. And it's the same thing with creativity and with you know, doing artworks and so on. Some things you have to kind of work through, like work really hard to kind of step over certain kind of thresholds. But initially, with ideas and with this kind of influx of ideas, you have to loosen up those. What Huxley was talking about, the doors of perception, right? You have to sort of try to be as open as possible, because the brain is, of course, as we know, a protection unit that filters a lot of influx. Otherwise, if it wouldn't do that, you would go totally bananas. So and when you relax, when you take it easy, when you kind of focus on, you let your mind drift away to somewhere else, it opens up those channels for those other things, and then you can sort of go back, and it's there. It's sort of it's very magical in that kind of sense, and it's a technique. But it's a technique that it's based on willpower, because you cannot have a kind of an artificial attitude to it. You cannot have a surf-faced will. You have to have a deep will, and that's a technique you have to can develop. I'm more interested in doing things that I'm not really sure it's art. Maybe somebody else can tell me, or maybe it's you know, way out of, you know, the regions of artistic, you know, behavior, and it becomes in opposition to the conservatives and to the conformists of artistic behavior, and then of course it develops into the artworks like the Kingdoms of Elgaland-Vargaland concept, where it's in opposition to the nation state and to politics and to how the hierarchical systems in Sweden and also around in the world, how they work, and can we come up with other kind of conclusions or, you know, with this problem. It is always creative to try to reach areas where you've never been. It's a very nervous situation, which is quite interesting. It's an unknown territory, and it just gives this kind of input straight away when you come to these kind of places, and then it's the balance between to cross a line or to expand a territory, and this discussion between the crossing over a border, crossing over this in between, or to expand the territory to the in between, into the in between, so the in between gets pushed further. These situations I find extremely creative and very interesting.
As radium was fading in potency in the early 1990s, von Hausswolff teamed up with his old friend Leif Elggren to not only conceptualize but also manifest not one but two new countries, the Kingdoms of Elgaland and Vargaland, also known as KREV. Beginning in 1992, the new countries set out on a sometimes paradoxical journey. These were new nations that claimed to be against traditional borders and boundaries, and at the same time they annexed all transitory regions and states of mind, like no man's lands in between borders. the hypnagogic and hypnopompic states between sleeping and waking, the escapistic territory, and the virtual digital room, etc. Citizens of KREV now have their own embassies, passports, currency, and, yes, their own national anthem. The levels of manifestation, ambition, and complex structures make KREV something very different from today's commodified artworks and scenes. KREV is not an artwork to be bought and sold. It has a global presence as fodder for further thought, philosophy, and debate.
I was tired of having Radium 22605 because it was a company. We had, in the end, we had to run it as a company because of tax reasons. I mean, you cannot avoid, if you live in a country, you cannot avoid, like, having this kind of tax people running around, asking, how much money you make and so on. So suddenly we had to have this company. I was really tired to have a company. So we just took it one step higher. So instead of a company, we were running a country. But it still has the same kind of idea to be open. So I mean, anybody can actually be a citizen, and it's just a matter of applying. Anybody could also do whatever he or she wanted to do within that framework of Elgaland-Vargaland. If they want to. And some have, like Ken Montgomery or Mike Harding and so on. And it has been several people that have been like having activity within the concept of Elgaland-Vargaland. So they're free to do it. But the limitations in this vast omnipotential project, the limitations lies in itself, because it's very anti-hierarchical, and at the same time it's embedded in humanity, these kind of hierarchic structures, king down to slaves or whatever, or workers and directors. You have this kind of pyramidal hierarchical structures, and it's so embedded in humans that they have a very, very difficult time to think in another direction. Like, we want to have kind of equalization in another way, that you could actually take control of your own life to a certain extent, as much as you can, and try to actually run your own life instead of having other people running your life, whether it's visual art or music or written text or poetry, literature. I think that's what makes change here in the world. But then I wouldn't say that all art and literature and music wants to do that, wants to change things or make change, making a difference. I think a lot of the art and the music done nowadays are very economically, situated. They want to make money, and that's it, and I can see some Chinese artists making these massive, huge sculptures in the spirit of Duchamp or whatever, and they sell it for a couple of $1 million, and they're happy, they don't want to have any change, so So I do think art changes everything in the world, and a project like Elgaland-Vargaland is a problematic project because it pushes the boundaries of art all the time, and that makes people very unsure if it is art or not, and what it is, because it can be suddenly a very kind of political issue, like when we went to Estonia. When we had 10 years celebration, was like 10 citizens of Elgaland-Vargaland. We went to Estonia with our passports, and it became a kind of a political situation because they didn't allow us to come into the country, and so on and so on. So it's political there, and it can be very a reality. And most people are used to art is some kind of fiction or some kind of fantasy come up, with some kind of crazy ideas or whatever. They're not really. If you go into that reality so much that it actually becomes reality, it's difficult for people to accept it as art. Where then this as an art world, it kind of fails in a way, because it's not taken seriously. But as an artwork, it also becomes a very big success because it disappears into the reality of people. So you have these two ways of doing it, and then it also depends on how much strength you have to uphold the energy of this kind of art world. And it was 25 years ago since we started this, and 25 years is a long time, and it's difficult to uphold a project of these dimensions for 25 years constantly, and also, of course, without anybody paying tax in this country, right? It's just like, but you never know if it makes a difference and so on. But I think that art in general does. I mean, because civilization is based upon art. It's based upon form. It's based upon artistic concepts, and then it's developed into structures, developed into military, formations, everything that has to do with composition comes from art and music. So it makes a difference. I might be good at some things, and other people might be good in other things, and then why should I learn to edit a film if somebody else can do it, or why should I learn cinematography and so on? So I just can't see these kind of qualifications that other people have, and at the same time they're kind of nice people. But also I'm also interested in this kind of Brian Geisen, William Burroughs' third mind, where a third person kind of occurs when you do a collaborative work with one other person, being it a man or a woman. And there's this kind of this it's easier to look upon a work like that, because you cannot solely identify yourself with it. You have to actually accept that there is some kind of mystical details about this work which belongs to the other collaborative person. So I think that this interests me because I get a little bit tired of myself, and I don't think that I am sometimes good enough individually, or I might lack a bit of self-confidence, and I would like to rely on somebody else's technical skills or even philosophical skills or aesthetical skills, and kind of lean on that person's mastery. So it can be different things that makes me want to work with somebody else. But deep if you take away the arts and take away these kind of products of films and music or whatever, I think it's just the fact is that I like other people, not all people, because I loathe mankind in a way, because they are damaging our environment and everything, and it doesn't really look that good actually for us. There was some scientists that said that we only have like, you know, another 100 years to go, you know, and then we're out of it. But I don't know about that, but some human creatures I really like and I really love, you know, and the best way to be around these people is to work with them. And this goes for my wife too, or my earlier wives too, which was like, you know, you love these people and you want to kind of do things together, you know, and what should we do together? Let's do a film, you know, let's do something. Let's have a good time. So it's much about affection and love as well, and not so much about like artistic products and, you know, productivity in that kind of sense.
Even if the most abstract artwork, even the most conceptual artwork, more or less tells a story. Every musical piece tells a story. There is this storytelling that humans need to do to be able to function, I think. Whether it's just a sentence, a small poem, or a book, like a novel, or whatever you do, you need to have that creative act. And it's fulfilled when another human being takes part of it. Either you collaborate with somebody or you show somebody else what you have done. And it creates a certain kind of pace that humans need to be able to survive, really.